So welcome to the Global Point Art Summit 2024. This third edition has been organized in close collaboration between Global Point and Lukan Helsingfors. And we want to thank the interns supporting this production, Tangwa Srisong and Ida Kuittinen. Today's conference will explore the critical theme of censorship and aims to be a forum for discussion of its complexities in the Finnish and global arts and culture scene. It intends to foster a dialogue and sharing that will help us to improve our understanding of its challenges and the complexities of this topic, so we can better understand how these affect us as professionals in this field. During the day, we will have several small artistic interventions. However, this will not be a stream, so if you are here with us, you're in luck. So who I am? My name is Kemê Pellicer. My pronouns are she, her. Maybe some of you already know me. I was also presenting the past year summit. I am average size. I have dark curly hair. I'm wearing glasses, purple glasses, a black and white dress, and purple shoes. I always find very challenging to say something about myself, like in a short way, but I will tell you that in this context, I'm a multidisciplinary artist, a cultural worker, a parent, and I work often as facilitator. Especially, I'm a learning-driven person, and I think probably most of you are, so you are here today for that reason. Today, I will be your MC, so I will guide you and work with you through the program. Also, I will be passing the microphone during the Q&A, so we will have Q&As after the panels. I will also tell you now about the practicalities of this space, and I will always do my best to point you in the right direction if you have any question about this summit. So I was very curious about today's theme and its definition and the history in our context in arts and culture. So I have been reading a lot about it these days. I was asking, what do we understand by censorship? It is probably that we don't have the same understandings. In internet, the average agreement is that it refers to restricting or suppressing speech, writing, or other forms of expression, such as music, poetry, visual arts, theater, etc. It can take many forms. It can be controlling information, including scientific or philosophical research. It's regulating art and media content and limiting the free speech. But also censorship is the most common violation of artistic freedom, which I didn't think about it before. Many artists are still censored today because their work or views go against beliefs or agendas of governments or political groups, social media platforms, museums, or individuals that have more power or access to that power in the moment. So it is often used by authority to control or prevent the spread of ideas that they consider harmful. And as I was reading about it, I thought, yeah, but how does censorship look in action, like daily, like little censorship acts? How many shades and shapes can it take? What are the differences between censorship and selection, or propaganda, or gatekeeping, or how they interact even? Can we unconsciously be complicit in censorship without even realizing it? How? And when do we censor ourselves, and why? Do we think about this? These are just few of the many questions that assault me as I was pondering it, and I am sure this room is filled with also many other important questions and critical insights. I'm ready to active listening, to do active listening together, learning together, but before we do all that, and before the official program begins, let's take a tiny moment to review the housekeeping notes, and thanks to these event founders, which are the Arts Promotion Center Finland, Taike, the City of Helsinki, and the Swedish Cultural Foundation in Finland. Now, the logistics, bear with me. About this venue, The fire exits are at the main entrance and through the cafe just at your back. Close to the main entrance is a staircase and a spacious elevator leading down to the basement. In the basement, you can find the toilets. There are 2 for women, 2 for men, and 1 gender-neutral toilet. There is also an accessible toilet. You can also use the hangars that you will find downstairs. There is plenty of space to leave your stuff. However, there is not surveillance there, so keep that in mind. You will find in the room some QR codes. I can see one, for example, in the column next to the camera. And you can use these QR codes during the summit or after to give your feedback. There will be some workshops running in parallel. If you don't quite remember if you enroll or not, in the front door of each workshop, you can find the list of participants. And there are still, I believe, a couple of free spots. So you can take a look now and enroll now if you want to. You just need to speak with Alex. Can you? Yes, Alex is raising their hands right now, so it's there. About the streaming and documentation, please remember that this event is being recorded. It's being streamed. Be mindful of that. If you don't want to appear in the documentation, please speak directly with the photographer, which is right now taking a picture of me. And you will recognize easily because it's holding a camera, but if you cannot see or you have some trouble with it, you can approach me or any of the organizers about it. Also, during the Q&A, important, if you really want to make a question, to pose a question, but you don't want to be the one doing it for some reason, you can also approach to Alex again, and Alex will raise your question for you. Now let's go through the safer space guidelines that you probably already read when you enrolled to this summit. This event is a discrimination-free and harassment-free zone. Do not assume anything, ask, listen, and discuss. Treat every individual with dignity and respect. Act honestly, truthfully, and with integrity. About conflicts, every disagreement can be solved through dialogue. Be transparent and accountable for all your actions. If you face any issues or experience a violation of this guideline, please contact the event organizers, which are standing on your back. You can take a look now. The anti-harassment person at this event is a board member of Global Point, the multidisciplinary artist Ibapuru Samaniego Bonin, which is not yet here, but you know, it's fashionable late, but we are hoping will be here soon. Yes, anyhow, you can approach me or Alex if you need to know who that person is. We will help you for sure. And I think we are ready for starting. Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. This was Helsinki Voice Studio humming El Condor Pasa. In English, The Condor Passes. A song that symbolizes the spirit of freedom. Now, yes, let's start our conference with the opening keynote by the editor-in-chief of Journalistic magazine, Marja Honkonen, who will speak on the freedom of the press and artistic expression, safeguarding media and diversity. The discussion is followed by the panel discussion exploring the global perspectives on censorship. Yes, so please, Marja. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a really powerful performance here before. Let me introduce you to Petri Kiuttu. He's the editor-in-chief of Selkosanomat, a newspaper that is aimed for people who have difficulties reading news in Finnish. Selkosanomat is an easy language, easy Finnish format. It's written in easy Finnish, which is a form of language where things are stated out quite plainly. Now, Selkosanomat is a fairly small publication. It only has about 20,000 readers a month. It comes out in print and online. In 2022, Selkosanomat ended up on a list of publications that a Russian troll farm blacklisted. It was considered and labeled as a dangerous site, promoting propaganda. Petri Kiuttu received all sorts of strange messages and weird phone calls. He was not in physical danger, but the whole deal was really odd. What was so important about this small publication that they ended up on the list? Now, I interviewed Petri then, and we talked about possible reasons. Selkosanomat has many Russian-speaking readers in Finland, he told me. News written in a plain language are both easy to read and understand and easy to translate. And when everything this happened, Selkosanomat had recently written about the massacre in Bucha, Ukraine. Now, this goes to show that attempts of censorship do not obey borders. My name is Marja Honkonen, and as you heard, I'm the editor-in-chief from Journalisti, the professional journal for journalists and other media professionals here in Finland. Our paper is published by the Union of Journalists in Finland, and one of the aims of both the paper and our organization is to keep and protect freedom of the press in Finland. Now, historically speaking, that's been a fairly easy job. The first law prohibiting censorship was adopted in Finland already in 1766 under Swedish law. And in more recent years, Finland was for several years the #1 country when it came to press freedom. Now, we even bragged it about a little. When Presidents Putin and Trump came to Finland to have a big summit, our main daily, Helsingin Sanomat, had this huge advertising campaign saying that, "Welcome to the land of free press, presidents." Well, nowadays, we still sport the top 10, as you can see here in the map. This map is produced by Reporters Without Borders yearly. It's a ranking where people see how the situation is in each country. And we're still there on the green. Altogether, 8 countries got the best score last year. That's not much. Finland kept its 5th place. We have been 5th for quite a while now. And ranking 5th is not, of course, the same thing as ranking 1st, but it's still pretty good compared to many European countries. So why is it then that press freedom seems to flourish here in Finland still? First of all, we have a lot of media, at least compared to the size of this country. Most of it is commercially run, which means but we also have a strong public service broadcaster. And even though media ownership continues to concentrate here, this plurality makes journalists more immune to being influenced by those in political or economical power. And even attempts of censorship are frowned upon, and they're really rare. And until very recent years, even all politicians have also seen the value of free critical press. We also do have a functioning self-regulatory system for the media. If you as a reader are dissatisfied with something published, you can complain about it to the Council of Mass Media in Finland instead of, say, taking the journalist to a court. The Council for Mass Media is a self-regulating committee, and it's established by publishers and journalists. It interprets good professional practice and also addresses how journalism should be made. And that's something that usually creates kind of trust within the audience. So when people have a way of complaining about what you're doing, they feel perhaps less of a need to do something else to you. And it also applies to the court system, of course. Last year, the Council received altogether 739 complaints, which is a lot. It's much more than in recent years. And imagine all of that being handled in the court. It just doesn't make sense. Now, to be honest, I should also note that Finland's rank might be good because we're a very consensus-oriented nation. Journalists respect politicians, and maybe sometimes even too much. People are kind of, you know, they could be a bit more critical too. But also politicians mostly do understand the importance of a free press. But I will get back to this on later. Now, unfortunately, you don't have to look very far to see where things are not quite as well as we Finnish journalists have it here. In fact, you can just look over the border. In Russia, our neighbor, almost all independent media outlets have been banned or blocked. To be critical of the Putin regime is for a journalist to risk your own safety and freedom. According to Reporters Without Borders, more than 1,500 journalists have fled Russia since the invasion to Ukraine. And to attack journalists is to attack your own people and their right for receiving information and take part in society. But it also hurts the rights of people in other countries. We're all less likely to receive any reliable information from inside Russia because journalists cannot operate there freely. Finnish journalists used to have a very good connection to Russian journalists, but now the situation seems more bleak. And that means that everyone here is less likely to get that information we dearly miss from getting there. Now, the same, of course, applies to Gaza and Palestine. Again, according to Reporters Without Borders, Palestine is currently the most dangerous place in the world for journalists. Since last October, well over 100 journalists have been killed in the Gaza Strip, most of them due to the acts of the Israeli Defense Forces. This means that Gaza has become a black hole when it comes to reporting. No information can escape. And without journalistic reporting, how can we know what's happening? Russia and Gaza Strip are, of course, not the only regions where journalists are under threat. This year, journalists have been killed because of their work in Sudan, in Myanmar, in Iraq, and in Pakistan. And many are also in prison. At the end of last year, 320 journalists were imprisoned, for example, for crimes against the state, false news, and defamation. The situation is, in this regard, very bad, also very close to us in Belarus, where at the end of the last year, 28 journalists were imprisoned. Now, of course, press freedom can be suppressed also in more subtle ways than killing or imprisoning journalists, and this brings us back here. Now, I mentioned earlier that Finland used to be #1 when it came to press freedom. In 2017, we dropped to 3rd place after the Prime Minister lashed out to our public service broadcaster Yle, and the then editor-in-chief, who was running things at that point, seemed to succumb under the pressure, and then he later resigned. We managed to climb back to #2, but then in 2022, we dropped again to being 5th. And this was due to a decision to press charges against 3 Helsingin Sanomat journalists who were involved in a story about military intelligence. Now, one might ask, was the drop of ranking only because these stories were not made in 2017, but they were made in 2022, or 2021, sorry. And was that because we hadn't really discussed sensitive topics such as military intelligence before we didn't get into trouble? You might be familiar with the term SLAP, which means strategic lawsuits against public participation. They are lawsuits that are meant to shut down journalists, to frighten them and others, or even to take revenge, and they are a global phenomenon. The cover you see here on the right was a story we did for Journalisti about different legal cases where journalists were taken to court for odd reasons. One of the cases was the Helsingin Sanomat case I mentioned before, and the other was a case about Annika Lindström, and she's on the cover here on the right. Annika used to be a reporter for an Ålandic newspaper, Nya Åland, and nowadays she's working in Hufvudstadsbladet in Helsinki. And Annika was taken to court for libel because she cited a story about an entrepreneur who was suspected of crimes. And you should note here, she didn't write the story. She only made a citation news piece to another paper about it. This case was taken through all the levels of the Finnish justice system. And finally, Annika was freed, but the process took several years. And these kinds of events do have a chilling effect on press freedom. They're prone to make journalists and avoid investigating certain subjects or stories or people. And we journalists are only human. We don't want to be in courts for 6 years about a news citation we made. Also, the way journalism and journalists are discussed in public debate has changed in the recent years in Finland. We're no stranger to hate speech and tones that seek to undermine media. It even seems that certain politicians seek to create confrontation with journalists to boost their own careers and amuse their voter bases. Last summer, several top politicians attacked online a young female journalist who was in her first job and had written one of her first columns about politics. And she's here on the other cover. The online harassment was so brutal, even the Council for the European Commissioner for Human Rights had to call Finnish authorities to clearly condemn the smear campaign and violent online threats. And remember, we're fifth in press freedom, so that gives kind of perspective on the global scale. And I interviewed this brave young journalist. Her name is Ida Eramaa later last year. And what she told me that for her, the most important thing was that her older colleagues stood up for her and made public statements and condemning the way that she was treated. It's very important for the professional community to seek to support especially young journalists in the beginning of their careers. The tactics I discussed here before are very familiar to journalists in other countries. Especially strategic lawsuits against public participations are not very uncommon in Europe. I should point out, though, that there is, of course, a need of also critical discussion about media. And that's part of freedom of expression, too. There are many things we should improve in Finnish media and media at large. We need a bigger variety of voices. We need a bigger variety of topics and views. And there is much more to be done for Finnish journalists and media to represent Finland as it is nowadays, multicultural, multilingual, multi-viewed. And the critique can be harsh. And it should be harsh at some times. There is also bad journalism made, of course, but it's also up to everyone involved in that discussion to keep it respectful. Dear friends, the freedom of press, the freedom of expression, the freedom of speech, these are all valuable rights, and they won't last unless they're cherished and protected. We cannot lull ourselves into thinking that because we have them now, because we ranked first, that we will be ranking first next year, and next year, and next year. These freedoms need to be used, or they will wither away. Now, in this last slide, it's a picture of an essay I personally found very eye-opening and important. A long-time journalist and author, Antti Blåfield, wrote once this essay for us in Journalisti, that the most difficult thing about freedom of speech is tolerance, or maybe you should call it patience or resilience or even forbearance. It's about resilience of different, even hurtful opinions, tolerance of questioning old beliefs, patience with new opinions that might seem strange at the time. And I think this all applies to art too. And forbearance, we need forbearance of even very critical and even sometimes unfair journalism. And in this sense, it's crucial that especially those in power understand this when it comes to court, when it comes to politicians. And I'm not saying it's easy, it's very, very hard. It's very hard to be criticized. Now, I should point out that tolerance, of course, doesn't mean that there wouldn't be any limits to, for example, hateful speech. The right of one person to speak freely might be in contradiction with someone else's right to protection from discrimination, for example. And there is a constant struggle between freedom of the press and, say, the right to privacy. And thus, there will be always discussions to be had about which right is more important in that case, privacy or free speech. Which line was the line crossed too far? Which story was too controversial to be published in hindsight? And these discussions are actually in the core of our freedoms. They are freedom of speech in action, to be said. And if these discussions are not had, if these boundaries are not tried, what good are our freedoms anyway? If we're too kind, what happens then? Now, today you will be discussing censorship and self-censorship in the field of arts. And I'm sure it will be interesting and thought-provoking, and you might even hear something that tries your patience. But thank you very much for doing so. You're doing the work of protecting the invaluable freedoms we're lucky to have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria, for giving this incredible overview of the Finnish, both and global landscape. And I'm happy to start the first session of our summit. We will continue to discuss questions that you raised in your keynote speech, addressing both to global tendencies, let's say, and global tendencies and personal experiences of our participants. And could you please take the first chair here? And let me introduce myself. My name is Aleksandra Dunaeva. I will moderate this first session, and I'm a theater researcher, PhD in theater studies, and I'm a migrant. And actually, I continue to write. My native language is Russian, and I continue to write about Russian theater and about some artists and companies in Russia that are struggling now with censorship every day with everything they create. So the censorship and propaganda is their issue, their problem that they face every day, and at the same time it's my problem as a writer whose value is not to put them into trouble by my writing. So thank you so much, Global Art Point, for having me here. I'm really interested in this session, and okay, let me please invite our today's speakers. Bogdan Drumin, come in here, please. Bogdan is a music producer and manager of the hip-hop artist Face, his brother. And Face Project were among the first musicians who spoke against Putin's regime in Russia. And currently Bogdan is seeking for asylum in Finland. And Spartak Khachanov, please. Welcome. Spartak is a multimedia artist and political refugee from Ukraine, and currently he's living in Finland. In his artistic practice, Spartak investigates of political instability, war, immigration, and nationalism. And Tatiana Solovyova will be interpreting Spartak during our session. And I would also like to add that there must have been another person here with us, but they had to drop out in the last moment because of safety reasons. And I think we should just bear in mind this fact that artists as well as journalists whose relatives and colleagues are still, for example, in the territories where war is waged and or under political pressing regimes, are really in danger. And every action, every public speech is an action in this situation. So I really appreciate that our speakers could come here and speak loudly. It's really important. May I address my first question to Spartak? And I will speak English and give a space to Tatiana to translate. So could you please share your experience of meeting with a censorship when being practicing artist in Ukraine? What was it? What were the circumstances? What was it look like? Thanks.
Кому-нибудь надо русский перевод здесь? Hands up. Нет, никому.
Здравствуйте всем. С цензурой... Слышно? С цензурой я сталкивался в своей творческой практике 2 раза. И это было в Украине, в Национальной академии изобразительных искусств и архитектуры, где я учился.
Hello, everybody. The meeting with censorship took place twice in Ukraine in the Academy of Fine Art where I was studying.
Первый раз это было летом 2018 года. Это был просмотр в Академии, и я выставил свой проект. Он посвящен был войне через призму Второй мировой войны. И за этот проект мне поставили очень заниженные оценки и сняли мне стипендии. Также...
Thank you. So the first time was in the summer of 2011. That was my student work regarding to the World War II. And actually I put it that critical that they took away my student wage or stipendia. And
стипендии, и до этого у меня были оценки хорошие, я был лучшим студентом кафедры скульптуры, и они хотели еще заставить меня, чтобы я больше такого делать не буду.
Before that, I actually was valued as a good student in the sculpture department of sculpture, but I got very bad marks because of that, and they tried to press on me so I wouldn't do anything like that anymore.
После, я промолчал по поводу этого, ничего не сказал. И второй раз уже произошла цензура моей работы искусства уже в 2018, уже зимой, на зимнем просмотре.
So that time I kept silent, I wouldn't react. And the second time was in the winter of 2019 then. What happened?
С 2016 года я исследую такое явление, как военные парады.
So I'm investigating the topic of war parade.
И на выставке, это было 18 декабря, я выставил проект под названием Parade of Penises. Это было большие.
Да, я помню.
Это было около 300-400 фигурок в виде пенисов, в форме пенисов, но в виде солдат, боевых военных машин, танки, артиллерии и все.
Как называлось?
Аппаратов пенисов.
So the second time here, I did the art object that was called the Parade of Penises, that actually were from 300 to 400 the sculptures of penises.
Это располагалось в центральном холле Академии на мраморной плитке. Это все находилось, расположено было как в параде. Там сперва идут солдаты, потом идет боевые машины, танки. Сперва танки начинают, от боевые машины, как в параде.
It was displayed, placed in the hall of the academy, and the order of it was like in the military parade, when the first comes the soldiers, and then the heavy military machines.
Когда декан вошел в академию, он сказал, что я больной. После этого уже где-то в 11 пришел декан кафедры дизайна, который никакого отношения ко мне не имел. И он резко подошел ко мне, начал орать, кричать и оскорблять, и угрожать, что меня закопает там, короче, на холмах в Киеве.
So at 11 o'clock in that morning came the director of the academy, and he was so shocked that he said that it won't be unnoticed for you. But then again, the other person came who was in charge of the students, but didn't have the straight connection to Spartak, and started to frighten him and terrified that he will be buried very soon.
И он пытался заставить меня, чтобы я убрал инсталляцию, но я не убрал инсталляцию. Он тогда пошел и начал ногами все работы ломать.
So he tried to convince Spartak to take away the installation, but he would refuse. So he started to crash the sculptures with his feet.
Да, после этого мне поставили оценки, двойки поставили за мои работы, за все работы. Хоть эта инсталляция была на свободную тему, не было, это была свободная тема.
It was the free topic of installation, but he got the worst possible marks from the teachers, like.
Я сделал программу художественную, которая была академическая, и была на вольной теме. Вот я выставил эту работу.
So that was the free academic presentation, and he doesn't see any crime in it.
Да, и после этого они поставили 2 по всем предметам. И когда я пошел на следующий день в администрацию, я знал, что я отчислен из академии.
So he got the worst marks, like number 2 in Russian mark system is the worst, and next day when he went to academy, he knew that he was kicked out.
Хоть и должно было, по-моему, быть 3 двойки или 4, у меня столько их не было. Они меня уже отчислили.
So though in the rules of the academic studies, there has to be 3 or 4 bad marks, he would have all of them. That was not actually true.
После этого вот я сразу заболел корью и попал в больницу. После больницы находился, я ничего не знал, что там вообще происходит. Оказалось, что меня уже там преследуют уже и группа С-14, это правоохранительная группа в Украине, которые, это друзья вот Владимира Харченко, которого с академии сбил.
So after that he got sick, ill, and he was in the hospital recovering from the sickness. And he actually didn't know what is going on, but at the same time there started to be a group of people who were strongly against him. So they started some kind of the persecution.
Эта группа вот С-14, она была во многих преступлениях, связанных в Украине, таких как на цыган они нападали и убили там людей, много чего они там понаделали. И Бузины то же самое, то, что журналист был в Украине убит, их главарь С-14, Карась.
So that was called the Group of 14, that was famous for the violence and for the persecution of the people who are against the Ukrainian military actions.
Это не совсем давай по теме. Вот. И вышло так, что я вышел из больницы, и вот уже 19 года, 21 января, я иду в академию, оказывается, там уже выслушали мое дело, меня туда не пригласили, хотя что пригласят. И когда я уже выхожу, пошел к ним, уже меня выгнали оттуда с дверей, меня встречает этот С-14 и хочет вывести меня с академии.
So on the 21st of January 2019, when he went to the academy, there were these people waiting for him and didn't let him in. So actually they physically grabbed him and took out of the building.
У них не получилось это сделать, потому что я ушел от них. Мы звонили в полицию, друзья, полиция через 4 часа приехала. Потом я ходил к следователю, следователь написал все заявление, то, что на меня преследование меня. Мне дали, копию не дали, то, что я дали именно талон всего этого.
And then he went to the police station to report on what has happened. No, actually they called the police that came in 4 hours late. But after all, in the police, when he asked to report the violence, they wouldn't start the case, but they would just give him some kind of the talon, квитан, check.
И я спросила, что мне делать, они сказали, будем решать.
So he asked, what am I supposed to do? And the police would say that they will decide.
Да, и вот это сделала академия, она вызвала именно 14 эту группу, и также они дали адрес, где я живу, нахожусь.
So that he claims that the academy was behind it, and they give his personal address to this band of 14th so that we'll be able to catch him and to.
Также академия, вот это было видео, где на телевидении декан академии говорит, что они вызвали из СБУ куратора. Из СБУ люди пришли, что меня, короче.
And the people from academy would call the curator from the Federative Service of Ukraine.
Служба безопасности.
This kind of secret service of Ukraine.
Да. После этого много кто мне тоже оскорбления писал, и вот 28 числа мне пишет знакомая художница, что какой-то журналист знакомый написал, что в сторону, где я живу, идет около 20-30 человек из группы С-14.
То есть это нет 28 числа.
Уже 28 числа.
So on the 28th of January of that year 2019, he was kind of warned that the group is approaching him.
Да, и я звонил в полицию, и снимал там видео, что я звоню, они сказали, что ожидайте, так как полиция не пришла. Я ушел к другу с женой, скрылся. Вот до этого, где-то 23 числа, мне написала журналистка с Финляндии, Оксана Черешева, и хотел узнать, что происходит, и как у меня дела, и мы с ней общались. И вот когда это случилось, уже 28 числа, она связалась с организацией художественной Финляндии, то, что происходит уже, что мне уже надо вывести.
So of course he got scared, and with his wife they escaped from the flat where they lived. At the same time, the journalist Tatiana Chelisheva called him and said that she has the connection with the Finnish authorities, and she's trying to give him the possibility to escape.
Да, и вот это, они купили на следующий день билеты 29-го, и 31-го я уже приехал в аэропорт Ванту.
So they bought the tickets, and on the 29th and on the 31st of January he was safely in Vanta in Finland.
Просто чтобы рассказать полностью эту всю тему, это долгое время, если полностью. Нам столько было.
It takes time to say all the details, but that's how it was.
Thank you so much for sharing, Spartak, but may I ask just one short question? Were there any interviews of those people who passed your personal info to nationalistic group? Did they explain and how, why did they do it?
Как они получили вашу личную информацию, чтобы... Спроси по-русски, чтобы...
Были ли какие-то заявления или комментарии от руководителей Академии, почему они передали вашу личную информацию националистической группе?
Ну, вообще, про меня там очень много уже как писали, или что придумывали додумки, что я там, я не знаю, там шпион, что ли. Разваливаю систему Академии, я не патриот. Вот,
So actually his personality was kind of covered with a different kind of false information and rumors that he is a spy and that he is acting in the sake of destroying Ukraine military system. And that he is not patriotic, so there was no doubt that they could do it.
Ну, я просто сам жил на Донбассе, это город Снежной. И вот то, что там происходило, мне, что Россия напала на Украину в 2014 году, вот это все происходящее, мне это очень волновало.
Because he lived in the Donbass, and the actually invention of Russia to Ukraine in 2000, did you mention 14?
14. Именно война началась в 14-м, а не 22-м.
14, that made a very big impact on him, so he was very active in that topic.
И еще они вот придумывали такие несуразицы, там, что я болею СПИДом, что я гей, что я там такое попридумывали, это вообще страшно.
So the rumors were like he is homosexual and that he is sick of in English. AIDS, yeah, AIDS, thank you.
And this all destroy the academical system and the state. Okay, thank you so much for sharing. And I'd like to pass the word to Bogdan too and ask, as far as I know, you and your brother, the FACE project, were among firsts who vocaled against some political issues, and you stepped against the invasion of Russia to Ukraine. So how did it affect your professional life? How did it affect your project? And please tell a little bit about FACE.
Yes, sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming here. So my brother, he's decided to become an artist in 2015. So we basically had all the steps of censorship. We went through all of them. At first, since he was just 18 years old when he decided to become a hip-hop artist, his lyrics were mostly like explicit, rebellious, you know, a lot of obscene language, obviously, which everyone knows. There's no doubt about that. So a lot of, maybe a lot of references to like his experiments with drugs and alcohol and sexuality, which most adolescents go through as well, or at least can relate or like understand the topics. So yeah, and at first, when the censorship came to our lives, when he decided to start touring, and it was at first like very, very small shows with like 50 attendees or 100 attendees or something, and mostly it was adolescents as well, like from the age of 14 to 18 maybe. So at first it was the so-called parents committees, which were like disturbed with the shows and the songs and everything, and they started to like send some complaints to like different institutions to stop the shows, to ban them, and sometimes it was successful, so the shows got cancelled. And so yeah, that was the first thing. And also, yeah, there were like topics of suicide thoughts, which actually also something very relatable to most adolescents. So that would also be a huge concern for the parents' committees and different like public movements, I don't know. So yeah, there were like a lot of those weird, sketchy like groups of people who nobody knows who they actually are and who are behind them, but in our understanding it was used as a tool of censorship. It's just like instead of you know, banning something from the institution itself, like the Prosecutor General's Office or Ministry of Culture or like FSB or police, instead of doing it like the straightforward way, they would come to some like parents committee and tell them to file a complaint. So then they receive the complaint and they have to react on that complaint, obviously. So yeah, it looked like they were forced to take any action, and then they had nothing to do but to ban the show or to like send us some threats or make us some propositions to not perform certain songs or like not to say certain words from the scene. For example, the obscene language, the swear words, the cursing. Yeah, so sometimes we actually agreed on those terms, and there were a couple shows where not a single swear word was said from the scene, but of course all the audience screamed it very loud and clear. But yeah, sometimes we took those compromises. But with every year, as the time went on, it was getting worse and worse and worse, because I feel like censorship is a bit of it's like a plug. If you have the the environment in which it can thrive, it will thrive, it will develop, it will like grow and grow and grow. And at first they don't like this, then they don't like that, and then they like something else, and it keeps on growing. And obviously the political situation in Russia got worse and worse over time, over the years. So yeah, then came the 2018, and there were like so-called elections in Russia for the president elections, the plebiscite mostly. So, and by that time, after like 2 years of battling all of these issues with some committees and some activists, so-called, my brother, he was very, very upset with all of this, and he finally started to, because before that he was just like a typical adolescent who didn't care about politics much and all that stuff. He just wanted to have fun, make music, be famous, get rich, and all the things people usually want at 18 years old, you know. So And then he started to be very upset with the political system, and there was so much propaganda everywhere about this so-called elections, and he started to speak out against it, like writing tweets and posts like "Don't go there, don't participate in this spectacle," and it's all lies, and so on and so forth, which brought the attention to him at first, and then he made an album. We made an album together, which was very politically charged. Like, oh, now it's better. Like very, very politically charged and socially charged, I would say. So, a very like bold statement against Putin's regime, which did not have a precedent before in Russian hip-hop music, I believe, not on that level at least. Because yeah, I had to say from the beginning probably that my brother, who is a rapper Face, he's quite well known in Russia. He has like more than 1 million of monthly Spotify listeners, almost 2 million of Instagram followers. So he's quite well known, I would say, in Russia, amongst the Russian youth, and probably not only youth. So yeah, and that also got a lot of attention from the power institutions in Russia, and the authorities started to like apply much more pressure to our tours and shows. It was like the main tool for them to oppress us as artists, is to try to ban or like spoil or break something that has to do with us touring, because at that time, still in 2018, there were not so much of digital streaming platforms, and the main source of income for artists in Russia back then, it was still touring money. So touring, if you don't have shows, you can't survive basically. So yeah, they were trying to ban the shows, and they were quite successful in it. So yeah, the cancellation of our touring, it was the main effect of us speaking out against the regime. And then then we were battling this, and sometimes we were able to perform, sometimes not, sometimes there were compromises. 2019 was a little bit on the lighter side, actually. It was always very different from region to region, from city to city, because there were at that time there were no like clear instructions from Moscow, so to speak. So everyone decided on their own, in their own like region or city, shall they ban it, shall they like put pressure, or shall they not? And so we were sometimes able to perform. And then came the COVID, obviously, the pandemic year, 2020, and 2021 was the year when Alexei Navalny has returned to Russia after being poisoned. And so he has returned to Russia. He was imprisoned right from the airport. And then there was the situation when his health started to deteriorate, and he asked for the doctors. And the colony authorities did not allow him use his own doctors, like the independent ones, not the prison ones. And he started to, I don't know, what was it, hunger strike, yeah, a hunger strike I think it's called. And the time went on, and it was quite a lot of days already, and we got quite worried about him. And my brother made a post on Instagram about Alexei Navalny and his situation, and he what was the calling? I don't know. Yeah, he suggested people, let's say that, he suggested people to come out in protest against the violence towards Alexei, because we were really, really like afraid of him dying in prison, which eventually, unfortunately, sadly happened. And so, yeah, and that was the turning point in our also life and career, and for other artists or public persons who decided to speak in support of Alexei Navalny during the spring of 2021, because then the so-called blacklist was made in the presidential administration, and those like celebrities and artists and public personas, they should have been banned from everything in Russia, because it was like already they were like considered an enemies of the state because of their support for Navalny. And it was not even so much of a political support for him at that moment in time. It was mostly, for us, it was mostly done out of humanitarian, I don't know, intentions, because it just felt so awful to watch a person die in prison, like, you know, live on air. So yeah. And we had a tour, like an annual tour planned for the autumn of 2021. So it was like half a year after, and the pressure we encountered during that time was like the one we didn't feel before, didn't experience before. It was the worst at that time. We got cancellations for our first 6 shows, and we could not do a single thing about it. And during the previous years, authorities usually started to try to threaten the promoters who were organizing our shows, or try to communicate with us artists directly. Then they changed their practices, and in 2021 they started to apply pressure on the concert halls and like event halls itself. And those places, which are usually mostly nightclubs in Russian like province, regions, cities, and of course none of them is like can you know, be the ideal perfect building where everything is in where everything, to say it, it's like, you know, the different inspectors, when they come, they can always find something that is wrong, and they can close the event hall, and people will lose their jobs, and so on and so forth. So they would threaten them like, we will come and we will check if everything is right with your building, with your like fire alarms, with your like.
Is it kind of a inspection? Inspection,
yeah, of course. So yeah, and nobody wanted to take us because we were so like problematic, and every concert hall and event hall would like, they would not agree to work with us, and because usually there is not much of a choice. It's like 1 or 2 clubs in a city, and if both of them do not want to take you, then you are out of luck and you cannot perform anywhere. Yeah, but then we were able to. It was probably the very, very, very last time when in Russia, like, media attention could still affect something, because when that started to happen, the first thing I did, I arranged a series of interviews, and so yeah, we wrote Instagram posts, so we were very, very open about the pressure, and we managed to save half of the tour, including the Moscow and St. Petersburg with the biggest shows, which is also quite a funny story in itself, because in Moscow the presidential administration itself reviewed our set list, which is hard to imagine, but it did happen. Yeah, they were going through the set list and they were trying to pose like their terms on us, like, these songs you will not perform, this you can, this you cannot. We were like, no, we will perform whatever we want and you will not do anything about it. So yeah, we did what we wanted, and we got away with it, but that was the very, very last time. And we were understanding very, very clearly by the end of 2021 that our like career in Russia is more or less over, at least while these people are staying in power positions. So yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yes,
Sorry, I'm a very talkative person.
Maybe if there will be more questions, we can like take them
Sure,
in Q&A session. Thank you so much. So I would like to ask Maria, like reflecting on the experiences that we just listened to, we see how bold and aggressive censorship and propaganda could be, how it affects straight boldly onto people. And could you please say something? I don't know. And my question actually was, how did this situation, I mean, now we have the word censorship, so we see, and Spartak and Bogdan told us how this right-handed, flow began in Ukraine and also in Russia, and how this propaganda grow and grow and grow. So how was it felt somehow in Finland? How did it affect Finland? In what way? So what challenge?
Censorship.
I mean, this situation in Russian context, and maybe what actions the journalist had to, do facing all this.
Yes. Well, first of all, as I already mentioned, of course, the fact that our neighboring country has very strict censorship of free press means that we are less likely to get information from there. Also, in the beginning of the war, many of the Finnish correspondents had to come back to Finland from Russia because they were unable to do their jobs there. They were under a threat of breaking the law. Now, I can't remember what's the name of the law, but like, if you talked about war, if you wrote about war instead of this special operation or whatever, you could have been under threat, and we know that one of the Washington Post journalists was also in prison for a long time because of this. So that was a straight effect to press freedom in Finland, of course. Now, I feel that I think one of the most dangerous things about censorship and the things that you described is how even citizens at some point kind of adopt the views of the government. So it's not just the fact that the government or the authorities want to censor art or free press or anything. It's more that, in a sense, people, it kind of flows over the universities and it flows over to what people think and feel about art and what they see proper and what they kind of view as good. And therefore, it's much harder to kind of challenge that because it's not just, the president. And
some person or institution.
Yeah, it's not just one institution that is doing that, but it's more like everyone around you thinks that, like, why are you doing this? Like, it would be much easier if you wouldn't talk about this, if you wouldn't write about this, if you wouldn't do this kind of art. So that's frightening. But I was also glad to hear that at least some point there was some effect that those things were written about in media, and I think that's one of the things journalists also outside Russia or outside these countries where they have a lot of censorship we can do, that we can bring light to these things, that they don't happen in the darkness. They don't just, concerts are not canceled for no reason at all, but they're brought to light that this is happening. And that's, of course, the very least we can do, but that's something we can do. Mm-hmm. So I would say that.
Thank you so much. And I would like to continue your thought and ask Spartak and Bogdan about to talk a little bit about the strategies of overcoming. What could art do? What can you do as artists, as activists, to overcome censorship? And maybe you have created already some strategies in your fields for it. Could you please share, if it's possible? And it would be great if Maria also reflect her thoughts from like a little bit outside of our arts field, what do you think art could do? And we have not got much time, sorry, but I think it's important that you tell your experience of overcoming censorship.
По своему опыту, я думаю, что искусство бороться против что-то, чего-то. И я думаю, что искусство, в первую очередь, это раздражитель является. Раздражитель.
So I think that art is more like irritator to the...
Я думаю, что художник это врач, который ставит диагноз.
So the artist is a doctor who is giving the diagnosis.
Он не лечит, а ставит диагноз. И задача художника это донести какой-то месседж, сообщение зрителю или обществу.
So he is not treating the patient, but he has to give the message to the society.
И для меня как государство это как, можно сказать, тело, и художник вот раздражает это тело, и, можно сказать, как какой-то прыщ или какая-то там аллергия на теле. И вот эта цензура пытается вот это выдавить, вот этот прыщ или вылечить лекарством. И давит, но опять оно где-то вылазит опять, вот это все. И вот эта борьба идет вот это между художником и государством.
И цензура. So he thinks that the state actually is the body, and when there is something wrong, like in infection or some pimple, so the artist is pointing at it. And censorship is trying to treat it, but anyway, this infection will go to another place, and then the artist would point it again.
И в случае меня это я был как инфекция, можно сказать, и меня как выдавили, в принципе, эту инфекцию.
So yeah, I was kind of infection, so I was pressed out of the body.
Есть которых в тюрьмы сажают там или убивают, замаривают, а у меня как-то легко, как прыщ, выдавили.
So there are cases when artists go to the jail, but I was kind of easy case, like a pimple that would just press me out. And irritator.
I can agree with some of the points made here, but I would say it applies not only to the artists and the state. It usually, and I'm like walking on a very like sharp line here. Okay, the society usually tends to try to extort and exclude people who are not like anyone else or like the majority. And since true artists are usually quite an extraordinary and unusual and extraordinary people usually, if we are talking not the merchants from the art, but the real true artists who do it from the like very sincere place, they tend to be also like excluded and extorted and discriminated and so on and so forth. So that is a very dangerous tendency in like every society, in my opinion. Nowadays it mostly happens, we can see it happening all across the Europe with immigrants, and it has been happening for a while, and I'm not saying that it's like a very easy and black and white thing, but it also does happen, yeah. So a very, very, very good point made by Spartak was that, I would rephrase it in my own way, my brother, he always used to say, an artist is a reflection of the society. He's like a mirror brought to the society to look at itself and what is happening. Because for the parents, it's much more easier to blame the artist for their child doing drugs, for example, because it's like oh yeah, of course he listens to that guy who has the song about doing drugs, so this is why my son is now doing drugs. No, your son is doing drugs because you are shit parents most of the times. Because you were not taking, spending time with him, giving him love, attention, and so on and so forth, so he tries to seek, these feelings somewhere else, and with substances sometimes also. So yeah, if something would not have happened, nobody would write songs about it, right? And at the end, when you're blaming an 18-year-old kid for like doing damage to your precious child, like this is also a child. This is your child as well, as society's child. This is not some, alien who fell to this planet, even if he looks like he is. This is your child as well. So this does not come from nowhere or from like different planet. This is all that is already happening in the society or in the state. And finally, trying to answer your question about the strategies. I don't really know about any strategies, and it would be very dumb of me to try to give any type of advice to people who live in the authoritarian countries, because to be honest, you cannot do much about it. And I would like to also note that I'm not 100% sure that our interviews or posts or something made any difference. We never know how the system actually works and who makes the decisions there and why and what is the reasoning behind it and so on and so forth. So we can only guess. And my guess is that it may or may not have affected our situation. But yeah, the only regret we have actually looking back is those few times when we were making some type of a compromise. Because nowadays we feel like we should have never agreed to any of those sick terms. We should have always accept that okay, tonight it is not possible to do the show on our terms or to write a song however we want to write it, the way we want to write it, the way we want to say the things we want to say. So this time we're not doing it. That's it. This is like, okay, we're out of luck tonight, so that's it. And do not make a compromise, because compromise is a very, very, very dangerous threat, a very dangerous one. It can lead you to such a burden that will be very hard to get out of. So yeah, do not make a compromise, I would say, and be fair and be bold. That would be probably my advice. And yeah, if you feel like the game, if you lost the game and it's time to go, then probably it's time to go. Or as Spartak said, you can also go to jail, but I personally do not see much reason to do so. So I would try to avoid it. Yeah, try to survive, basically, would be my advice. Yeah, try not to get killed, not to get in prison, and stay true to yourself. Yeah, that would be the strategy.
Oh, what a fatalistic point of view.
No,
thank you.
It's just real life, We do not have much reasons for optimism at the moment, unfortunately. I don't see it.
I agree. But
not in Russia, not in the rest of the world, to be honest, as well.
Maya, maybe you could tell something inspiring. Maybe you see how art can affect censorship, please.
Yeah, well, I wish I would have some solution. I, of course, do not have one. There are things that organizations do. For example, Reporters Without Borders had this project where they created mirroring sites for journalists' outlets that were censored in totalitarian countries, that they kind of copied the same thing to servers that are in democratic countries. So even if that news site was shut down in that country, it could still kind of live on in another country. But that's kind of like a drop in the ocean, of course. It doesn't really help people there that much. It does something, but it doesn't solve the whole thing. Now, as a journalist, I think the power of art is something that, or I feel that maybe art could kind of reach people in a more subtle way. As I mentioned earlier, this thing about Selkosanomat, which states everything in plain Finnish, and it was seen as dangerous because it was so blunt. It was so kind of, it left no questions. But maybe art, because art can have so many different forms and it can speak to you in so many different ways that journalism cannot do. Journalism is very straightforward. So maybe art could kind of affect people in a way that they don't first maybe realize that they're giving new thoughts and they're giving this kind of a different view of the society they're living in. And that's sort of my hope for art, because journalism cannot hide between any kind of like ways of different expression. It's just there. And art can have so much more variety. But yeah, I wish I could say that it gets better, but I'm not sure.
Can I also add, please?
No.
Brief notes.
No, we do not have time for if only
now.
very quick, because we have just 5 minutes for a couple of questions.
Very quick, yes. I would also like to add that I think it's a very dangerous thing to overestimate the effect that journalism and art and anything can have on the societies and people, especially nowadays when we live in the consumerist society and everything nowadays is a content, art is a content, and journalism, news and everything also a content, which like fights for your attention with Netflix and YouTube and TikTok and everything else. It's all content nowadays. That is the first thing to say. And second is that even if you impose the information on someone, like if you manage to make someone read something or listen to something or watch something, but the person is living in an authoritarian or totalitarian society, okay, now he knows, now he has read about some terrible crimes or something atrocious. And what's next? What can he really do about it? So he has to live with it, which is quite painful. This is an illusion that like Russian people, they do not know the truth, they are brainwashed. Everyone knows the truth. Everyone more or less understands what's going on. But it's so painful to live with the truth that they try to extort it out of their mind as much as they can, not to think about it, like distract themselves from it, because they are completely powerless. They cannot do anything about it at all. So the value of information is of course valuable, but it unfortunately cannot like overthrow the regimes like this. This is not nearly enough. And more or less we can only of course we can only proceed with what we are doing, like journalism and art and everything, but unfortunately it cannot do miracles and wonders. It's more like a note in the bottle which we send, hoping it will reach someone and at least make some tiny difference for somebody. That's the most we can hope for, in my personal view.
Okay, thank you. I will not take time by thanking you all, but I really thanks for sharing your painful but very important experience. And I'd like to pass the mic to the audience. I'm sure there are questions and we have time for several of them. Just raise your hand and I will come with the mic.
Sorry, what's the situation with your brother? I didn't understand, because you were talking about where he was or back then, but where is he now?
We have fled the country when the war has started. Immediately, yeah.
Okay.
So we are in immigration, or I don't know what it's called. It's a strange situation. Okay. Exile, yes, let's call it exile, but I don't know what is it.
Okay, and you made a decision both to go different places, or it just depends on...
Where to go?
Yeah.
I ended up here for a number of reasons, and I'm an asylum seeker here, so it's a very long period of time to be somewhere. And my brother, he's right now living this nomad lifestyle, traveling at the moment visa-free countries because his Schengen visa has expired, and it's such a terrible pain to try to make a new one nowadays. So yeah, it's a very interesting period of our lives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
More than a question, maybe kind of like something that sort of triggered in my brain when you last spoke, Maya. And I'm not saying you meant it like that, because I think that what you meant was sort of like this of hitting your message away from whomever's controlling the discourse. But I think that like part of pointing the finger at what's wrong means being quite blunt and sort of like fostering critical thinking in society, not like trying to brainwash people into like this cult kind of vibe thingy where we're not like really aware of what's going on or what we're just like clapping or celebrating. I think that like it is really important that the message is clear when it's political or politically charged. And in a way, like I get what it means to sort of like hide this away from whomever's regulating, so that it sort of like lives through and doesn't get stopped. And that's where kind of like the constant compromise, or like how much are we willing to negotiate so that we can keep on ongoing with our discourse. But it's like a really tricky, I don't know if you get what I mean. Like, and I was hoping that maybe you could like elaborate further what you meant as well. But like, it kind of like triggered that in my brain, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and I agree on that. It's a tricky balance. I'm not an artist, so I don't want to make bold statements about art, but what was said earlier was that sometimes people find it, well, first of all, they might receive information and then they are not able to do anything, or then it might be so that they receive information but do not want to accept it. And I think to the ways of art, it might be easier for people to accept these things because it's not so cruel as journalism is in part. But I also get what you mean by that art has to be honest and it has to be upfront about its motives and mission. So it's a tricky balance, I might say. But yeah, I got your point. Thanks.
Adding to that, when we made our politically charged album in 2018, the reaction of our listeners was mostly like, why write songs about it? Everyone understands that it's all bad, so why sing about it? It's not like, oh, such a revelation, I didn't know how terrible life in Russia was, now he's like enlightened me. No, it's like, why? It was quite a flop actually at the time, because before that he was making like entertaining songs and party songs, and then he comes out with something like this, and it's so dark, and and everyone was like quite appalled by it, and yeah, it's like why think about it? So I don't know if it's if art which is socially or politically charged is working much better than journalism or something. It's very hard for people to like encounter the painful topics, and most people are trying to avoid it because they cannot change anything. And I noticed this sense of helplessness not only in Russians, but it's also like everywhere.
On this minor note, we have to finish our session. Thank you so much for speaking. Thank you so much for coming this early summer morning. And we're finishing, but the summit continues. So thanks a lot, Kemê.
Thank you, Aleksandra. Okay, so thank you very much. Now there is a little bio break. You can drink water, visit the restroom, stretch your legs, whatever you need. There will be a longer break after the next panel, but please remember that we will continue on time at 11:15 here. So